The gunshot cracked through the valley, sharp and final. Catherine Blackwood didn't scream. She didn't have time. She just dove, hitting the dirt behind her father's overturned wagon, the air thick with gunpowder and dust. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, terrible silence. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not in the middle of the vast, empty Wyoming territory in 1875. This was supposed to be a new beginning, not an end. Her father's body lay just feet away, a still shape in the afternoon sun. The bandits were tearing through their life's possessions, their laughter like stones clattering in a tin bucket. Catherine risked a peek around the splintered wood. 3 of them. Tossing aside family heirlooms, anything that didn't shine or jingle. A 4th outlaw was down, a dark stain spreading on his shirt. Her father's last shot, his last act of defiance before they cut him down. "Check for the girl," one of them growled, his voice a rasp of gravel and whiskey. "Martin swore he saw a woman with the old man." Catherine's blood ran cold. She had maybe 3 seconds. Stay hidden. Pray to a God she wasn't sure was listening. Or run. The tall prairie grass swayed just beyond the wagon, a sea of green offering a sliver of hope. She gathered her skirts, muscles coiling like a spring. But just as she was about to launch herself into the open, a whistle cut through the air. It wasn't human. It was a signal. The bandits froze, their heads snapping up. "Someone's coming," one of them hissed, dropping a silver locket that had belonged to Catherine's mother. Catherine looked to the north. A plume of dust was rising from the horizon, moving fast. Too fast for a wagon. A single rider. "A rider! Let's get out of here!" the leader barked, snatching a leather pouch from the wreckage. "We got what we came for." They scrambled onto their horses, spurring them south, swallowed by the prairie as quickly as they had appeared. Catherine stayed put, her body locked in place. Was this new rider a savior? Or just another vulture circling the dead? The horseman crested the hill at a full gallop, a silhouette against the harsh blue sky. He rode a powerful chestnut stallion, moving as one with the animal. A worn Stetson shadowed his face, but she could see a square jaw, dark with stubble. A Winchester rifle lay across his saddle. A Colt revolver was holstered at his hip. He was armed. Dangerous. He slowed his horse to a walk as he neared the scene, his eyes taking in everything at once. The dead outlaw. Her father. The ransacked wagon. And then his gaze locked onto the sliver of her dress visible behind the wheel. Catherine flinched. He saw her. The stranger dismounted in one smooth, practiced motion. His boots landed softly in the dirt. "You can come out," he called. His voice was deep, but surprisingly calm. "They're long gone." Catherine didn't move. The tall grass was still her best bet. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, taking off his hat. He had dark hair and eyes that seemed to cut right through her hiding spot. "But if you run, you won't make it a mile out here. Not alone." He was right. She knew he was right. Wilderness for 100 miles in every direction. No horse, no water. She'd be dead by morning. Slowly, Catherine pushed herself to her feet. Her father's small derringer, a tiny silver thing, was clutched in her hand. She raised it, her arm trembling, and pointed it straight at the stranger's heart. "That's far enough," she said. Her voice was thin, but it didn't break. The man stopped, holding up one hand, palm open. His expression was unreadable. "You're right to be cautious." "Who are you?" she demanded. "Name's Jackson Reeves. Folks call me Jack." "What do you want, Jack?" His eyes flickered from her face to the body of her father, and for a second she saw a flash of something that looked like pity, or maybe regret. "Right now, to help you bury your father, and get you somewhere safe before those men get thirsty and decide to circle back." Catherine's arm ached. The little gun felt impossibly heavy. "I don't even know you," she whispered, the fight draining out of her. The cowboy gave a small, sad smile. You don't have to. Not yet. And for some reason she couldn't explain, those words broke through the wall of her fear. The derringer lowered. She looked back at the still form on the ground. My father. I'll help you, Jack promised. But we need to get off the road. Those men might not have been alone. Catherine could only nod, numb. Jack moved toward her slowly like he was calming a spooked horse. Anything you need from the wagon? He asked. She thought of the small trunk, her mother's locket, the family Bible, the last pieces of her old life. Yes, a trunk, my personal things. Jack nodded, moving to the overturned wagon. He righted the small trunk, checking the latch. This one? She nodded again. I'll tie it to my horse. Can you ride? Yes, she said. My father taught me. Good, Jack said, lifting the trunk as if it weighed nothing. We'll ride double for now. While Jack secured her belongings, Catherine knelt by her father. His face was peaceful, a cruel trick of death. She gently closed his eyes, her fingers trembling. I'm sorry, Papa, she whispered. I'll make it to Silver Creek, I promise. Jack returned with a blanket. We should wrap him, he said softly. Together, in a silence broken only by the prairie wind, they prepared her father for burial. Jack dug the grave himself, under a lonely elm tree that stood like a sentinel on the plains. The sun was brutal, but he worked without complaint, the muscles in his back straining against his cotton shirt. When it was deep enough, he helped her lower her father into the earth. Catherine mumbled a few lines of a prayer she barely remembered, her voice lost in the wind. Jack stood by, hat held against his chest, head bowed. The finality of it was a physical weight, crushing the air from her lungs. She was alone, utterly, terrifyingly alone, at the mercy of a man she'd met an hour ago. He made a crude cross from the splintered wood of the wagon. Henry Blackwood, Catherine supplied when he looked at her. 1830 to 1875. Jack carved the letters into the wood with his knife. I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Blackwood. Catherine, she said, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. He nodded once. We need to go, Catherine. Daylight's burning. She looked at him then, really looked at him. He couldn't be much older than 30. His face was weathered, carved by sun and wind, but his eyes were a startling blue, the color of the sky after a storm. And they held a deep, settled weariness that had nothing to do with his age. Why are you helping me? She asked. Jack's face remained a mask. Because it's what decent folks do. He held out a hand. Let's get you somewhere safe. With a last, heartbreaking look at the mound of fresh earth, Catherine took his hand. He helped her onto the stallion, and she settled behind him, her hands hovering uncertainly at his waist. Hold tight, he said. She had no choice. She gripped his shirt as the horse began to move, carrying her away from the wreckage of her world. She didn't know this man. She couldn't trust him, but her survival was now tied to his. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire, Catherine closed her eyes and prayed she hadn't just made the biggest mistake of her life. The town of Whispering Pines emerged from the twilight like a ghost, a handful of wooden buildings on a single dusty street. Lanterns flickered in the windows, and the faint, tinny sound of a piano drifted from a saloon. It wasn't much, but after the endless prairie, it felt like a metropolis. It's not Silver Creek, Jack said, his voice the first sound between them in hours, but the sheriff here is a good man, and Mrs. Abernathy runs a clean boarding house. Catherine just nodded against his back, too tired to speak. Every muscle screamed from the long ride. They drew stairs as they rode down the main street. A woman riding double with a strange man was enough to fuel gossip for a month in a town this small. Jack didn't seem to notice. He stopped in front of a two-story building with a simple sign. Abernathy Boarding House. He dismounted and helped her down. Her legs almost gave out, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. Easy, he murmured. It's been a long day. She pulled away, trying to find some scrap of her former pride. I'm fine, she said, a lie so thin it was transparent. Jack grabbed her trunk and led her inside. A bell tinkled. A plump, stern-looking woman with gray hair and a tight bun looked up. Jack Reeves, she said, her tone familiar. Didn't figure on seeing you again so soon. Evening, Mrs. Abernathy, he said, setting down the trunk. This is Miss Catherine Blackwood. She's in need of a room. The woman's sharp eyes took in Catherine's torn dress, her dirt-streaked face, the raw grief in her eyes. Her expression softened just a little. I see. What happened, child? Catherine opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. The lump in her throat was too big. Outlaws, Jack said for her. Hit their wagon on the North Road. Her father didn't make it. Mrs. Abernathy's face crumpled with sympathy. Oh, you poor dear. She came around the counter and took Catherine's hands. They were freezing. You'll stay here, of course. I've a room all ready. I can't, Catherine started, reality crashing in. They took most of our money. We'll sort that tomorrow, the woman said firmly. Tonight you need a hot meal and a soft bed. Jack cleared his throat. I'll cover her lodging for the week. And I'll go talk to Sheriff Mills. Catherine turned to him, stunned. Mr. Reeves, I can't possibly. It's Jack, he cut in. And yes, you can. Call it a loan. Pay it back when you're on your feet. Mrs. Abernathy nodded, a decision made. That's settled. Come along, Miss Blackwood. I'll show you to your room. Betsy will bring up hot water. Catherine was too exhausted to argue anymore. She gave Jack a small nod. Thank you, she said, the words feeling inadequate. For everything. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Get some rest, he said. I'll check on you in the morning. He settled his hat on his head and was gone, stepping back out into the night, leaving her with a storm of unanswered questions. The room was small and clean, a narrow bed, a washstand, a single window. After Mrs. Abernathy left, Catherine just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. They were caked with dirt and dried blood, her father's blood. The dam finally broke. A knock at the door brought a young maid with a pitcher of steaming water and a bowl of stew. Catherine washed mechanically, watching the water turn brown, then pink. She couldn't eat. Instead, she opened her trunk and took out her father's journal. The plan had been so simple. Get to Silver Creek. Meet his old Army friend, James Thornton, who owned a ranch. A fresh start. Now she was alone, days away, with no horse, no money, and only a name. A promise made a decade ago. She blew out the lamp and lay in the dark, the unfamiliar sheets cool against her skin. And for the first time since the gunshot, she let herself cry, silent, racking sobs that shook her until she fell into a sleep haunted by the image of a stranger's piercing blue eyes. Morning came with the clatter of wagons on the street below. Catherine dressed in her only other clean dress and went downstairs. Mrs. Abernathy met her with coffee and biscuits. You look a bit better, the older woman said, her eyes kind. Still pale as a ghost, though. Jack stopped by, Mrs. Abernathy added, watching her closely. Said the sheriff's got a posse together. They rode out at dawn to look for those men. Catherine's hand shook as she lifted her cup. Do they think they'll find them? Hard to say. Jack's the best tracker in these parts, but they've got a good head start. The boarding house owner refilled her cup. He also left this for you. She placed a small leather pouch on the table. It clinked. Inside was a handful of coins, enough for a stagecoach ticket, with some to spare. I can't take this, Catherine protested. He said you'd say that, Mrs. Abernathy replied, a hint of a smile in her voice. Told me to tell you it's a loan, to be paid back when you get to Silver Creek. Catherine froze. How did he know I was going to Silver Creek? Mrs. Abernathy's smile faded. She just looked at Catherine, her expression suddenly serious. Jack Reeves knows a lot of things he shouldn't. You'd do well to remember that. The cryptic warning sent a shiver down Catherine's spine. She explained her plan about her father's friend, James Thornton. Thornton's place? Mrs. Abernathy looked surprised. That's one of the biggest ranches in the territory. Your father must have been a good friend indeed. He saved his life in the war, Catherine explained. That explains it. Well, the next stage to Silver Creek leaves tomorrow morning. I'll be on it, Catherine decided. The sooner she was away from this town and its mysterious tracker, the better. She spent the morning at the mercantile buying a few necessities. The shopkeeper confirmed that the Thornton Ranch was prosperous, a small comfort in a sea of uncertainty. She was just paying when the door swung open, and Jack Reeves walked in. He was covered in dust, his face grim, but his eyes lit up for a second when he saw her. "Miss Blackwood," he said, removing his hat. "Good to see you on your feet." "Mr. Reeves," she acknowledged, her voice stiff. "I heard you rode with the sheriff." "Tracked them 15 miles south," he said. "Lost the trail at the river. The sheriff's still looking." He paused. "I figured you might need some help today." "I've managed," she said coolly. "I've bought my ticket for the stage tomorrow." If her coldness bothered him, he didn't show it. "Good. Silver Creek is a 3-day journey." Catherine looked him straight in the eye. "You knew my destination. You still haven't told me how." Jack shifted, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "Your father told me." Catherine's heart skipped a beat. "That's impossible. He was dead when you arrived." Jack's expression was carefully blank, but his blue eyes were intense. "He wasn't quite gone when I got there, Catherine. He was holding on. He used his last breath to ask me to help his daughter get to Silver Creek." The world tilted. Her father had been alive. He'd spoken to this man while she cowered behind the wagon. She swayed, gripping the counter. "Miss Blackwood?" Jack took a step toward her, his voice filled with concern. "I'm fine," she said, the words automatic. I didn't know." His face softened. "He didn't suffer long, but he knew you were safe." Catherine could only nod, a fresh wave of grief washing over her. She paid the shopkeeper and turned to leave. Jack held the door for her. "May I walk you back?" he asked. She hesitated. Every instinct told her to run from this man and his secrets, but she couldn't deny the debt she owed him. "Yes," she agreed. They walked down the boardwalk, a foot of space between them, but she could feel the heat of his presence. People stared, whispering behind their hands. "They're staring," she murmured. "Small towns," Jack said, his voice low. "By supper time, the story will be, we're either running from the law or running to the altar." A hysterical bubble of laughter escaped her. "And which is it?" He stopped, turning to her. For the first time, a real smile touched his lips, transforming his harsh features. "Neither, Miss Blackwood. I just prefer they'd mind their own business." They reached the boarding house. She paused on the bottom step. "Thank you for the loan. I will repay you." "No rush," he said. He looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. "I'll see you at supper?" "Yes." "Good day, Miss Blackwood." He tipped his hat and walked away, his back straight and broad. She watched him go, a knot of confusion tightening in her stomach. Who was this man? Why did he keep helping her? The story about her father's last words didn't feel right. It felt too convenient, too perfect. As she turned to go inside, her eyes fell on the community board next to the door. A piece of paper, weathered and peeling at the edges, was tacked to the wood. It was a wanted poster. A crude drawing of a man's face stared back at her. Beneath it, in bold black letters, were the words, "Wanted, dead or alive." And below that, a name, Jackson Reeves. The description matched. 6 feet tall, blue eyes, a faint scar through his right eyebrow she hadn't noticed before. The charge, armed robbery and murder in the Colorado Territory. The bounty, $500. The air rushed from her lungs. The man who had saved her was a killer, an outlaw. Was this all a game? Was he just waiting for the right moment to take what little she had left? Her hand shot out, ready to rip the poster from the board, to destroy the evidence of her own foolishness. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Sheriff Mills stood just a few feet away, his eyes kind but firm. That's official town business. Her hand froze. This man, she said, her voice a whisper. Is it true? The sheriff looked at the poster. Depends who you ask. Some folks say Jack Reeves is a cold-blooded killer. Others say he was set up by a rich man's son in Colorado. He looked back at her. I take it you've met him. He saved my life, she admitted. He buried my father. Sheriff Mills nodded slowly. Sounds like the Jack Reeves I know. Been around these parts for 2 years. Keeps to himself. But when there's trouble, he always seems to be there to help. He tapped the poster. I've known about this for 18 months. Could have arrested him any day I wanted. Why haven't you? A wry smile touched the sheriff's lips. Let's just say my gut tells me the law got it wrong in Colorado, and a man's character is measured by what he does, not what's written about him on a piece of paper. He pinned her with a look. He helped you, didn't he? When you had no one else? She could only nod. Then maybe you ought to trust your gut too, Miss Blackwood. He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving her staring at the face of the man who was either her savior or her doom. She didn't know which was more terrifying. Supper that night was a tense affair. The dining room was full, the air thick with the smell of roast beef and the low hum of conversation. Catherine barely touched her food, acutely aware of Jack Reeves sitting at the far end of the table. He ate in silence, his presence a heavy weight in the room. He knew that she knew. She could feel it. She could feel his eyes on her, even when he was looking away. The conversation buzzed around her, but she couldn't focus. All she could see was the wanted poster, the words dead or alive burned into her mind. After the meal, she escaped to the small back porch, gasping for the cold night air. The Wyoming sky was a vast, dark blanket, littered with a million stars. So different from the smoggy skies of Boston. It felt like another world. Beautiful night. His voice came from the shadows, and she jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. Jack stepped into the light from the kitchen window, leaning against a post a few feet away. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the stars. I saw the poster, she said, the words coming out in a rush. There was no point in pretending. He didn't seem surprised. He just nodded slowly. Figured you would. Is it true? She demanded. Did you do it? Did you rob that bank? Did you kill those men? He finally turned to look at her. And in the dim light, his face was a mask of shadows and secrets. I was at the bank, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. But I didn't kill anyone. Then why? The man who did the shooting was a judge's son, a powerful man. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, an easy man to blame. He looked away, back at the endless darkness. I'm not innocent, Catherine. I was there. I made a bad choice. But I am not a murderer. He used her first name. It sent a strange shiver through her. Why are you telling me this? He pushed off the post and took a step closer, not threatening, just closing the distance. Because you asked, and because whatever happens, I want you to know the truth, for better or worse. Sheriff Mills believes you, she said, thinking out loud. A faint, bitter smile touched his lips. Mills is a good man. He judges a man by his actions, not his past. And what am I supposed to judge you by, Mr. Reeves? She asked, her voice sharper than she intended. That's for you to decide, he said softly. But I hope you know this much. I would never have harmed you. or your father. She wanted to believe him. She desperately wanted to, but the fear was a cold knot in her stomach. The stage leaves at 8 in the morning, she said, changing the subject. I need to get some rest. He nodded, stepping back, giving her space. Safe travels to Silver Creek, Miss Blackwood. She turned to go inside, her hand on the doorknob. Will I see you in the morning? She asked, not knowing why she was asking. She saw a flicker of disappointment in his eyes before he masked it. No, he said. I'm riding out tonight. Got work waiting for me north of here. I see. A strange sense of loss washed over her. Then, goodbye. Goodbye, Catherine. His voice was low, and it followed her as she retreated into the warmth of the boarding house, leaving him alone in the cold darkness. As she climbed the stairs to her room, she felt hollow, as if she were leaving a crucial part of the story unfinished. The 3-day stagecoach journey to Silver Creek was a jarring, uncomfortable blur. Catherine was grateful for the company of a cattle buyer and his wife, who filled the long hours with mundane chatter that kept her from thinking too much about the man she'd left behind. Silver Creek was a proper town, bigger than Whispering Pines, with brick buildings and a sense of permanence. It felt safer, more civilized. Her father's friend, James Thornton, met her at the hotel. He was a tall, imposing man with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that mirrored the sadness in her own when she told him what had happened to her father. Henry was the best friend a man could ask for, Thornton said, his voice thick with emotion. He saved my life at Gettysburg. The offer I made him stands for you, Miss Blackwood. My home is your home, for as long as you need it. The Thornton Ranch was a sprawling, impressive operation, a stark contrast to the wild prairie she had just crossed. A large white house stood on a hill, surrounded by neat fences and bustling outbuildings. Thornton's daughter, Rachel, a cheerful young woman about her own age, greeted her with a warm smile and open arms. For the first time in weeks, Catherine felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she could build a life here. Maybe she could finally be safe. The weeks turned into months. Catherine fell into the rhythm of ranch life, helping Thornton with his bookkeeping, her sharp mind a welcome asset. She found a true friend in Rachel, and a father figure in James Thornton. The grief for her father began to recede, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. She pushed the memory of Jack Reeves to the back of her mind, a dark and complicated chapter she was determined to close. But sometimes, late at night, she would find herself staring out at the vast, dark landscape, wondering where he was, and if she had been a fool to run away. Then came the summer dance. The entire county was invited. The big barn was strung with lanterns, the air filled with the sounds of a fiddle and laughter. Catherine, feeling almost like her old self in a blue dress Rachel had lent her, was trying to catch her breath by the refreshment table when a familiar voice cut through the noise. This is a little different from the dances back in Boston, I'd wager. She froze. The punch cup in her hand trembled. She knew that voice. She had heard it in her dreams. Slowly, she turned. Jack Reeves stood there. He was clean-shaven, his dark hair neatly combed. He wore a crisp white shirt and a dark vest. He looked civilized. But his eyes were the same intense, piercing blue that saw everything. "Mr. Reeves," she breathed, her voice a ghost. "What are you doing here?" A slow smile spread across his face. "I work here," he said simply. "Been the foreman for almost a year now." The cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the wooden floor. Foreman. He hadn't just been a drifter. He worked here. At the very ranch she had fled to. He had known all along. He had let her run, knowing exactly where she was going. "You knew," she whispered, the noise of the party fading to a dull roar in her ears. "You knew I was coming here." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "If I had told you, would you have believed I was just a cowboy? Or would you have thought the wanted man was following you?" He had a point. but the deception still stung. "Does Mr. Thornton know?" she asked, her voice sharp. "About the poster? About the murder?" "He knows everything," Jack said. "He's the one who hired me." Before she could process this new revelation, Rachel appeared, her eyes sparkling. "Catherine, you have to dance." "Oh, Jack, you're back from the North Pasture. Perfect. You two have met, haven't you?" Catherine stared at Jack, her mind reeling. He was the foreman. James Thornton, the man who had become her protector, had knowingly hired a wanted man. Why? What was going on at this ranch? "We've met," Catherine said, her voice tight. "Then you must dance," Rachel insisted, pushing them towards the floor. Jack held out his hand. His eyes held a silent question. She shouldn't. She should turn and walk away. But she needed answers, and she realized with a sinking heart that she was tired of running from him. She placed her hand in his. A jolt, like lightning, shot up her arm. He led her into the waltz, his hand resting firmly on her waist. "You've got questions," he said, his voice a low rumble beneath the music. "A few," she replied, her tone icy. "Why didn't you tell me you worked for Mr. Thornton?" "I told you. You would have run faster and further." "And Mr. Thornton? Why would he hire a wanted man?" "Because he knows the truth," Jack said, his grip tightening slightly as he guided her through a turn. "He knows I was framed, and he knows who did it." Catherine's breath caught. "Who?" "The same judge's son who pulled the trigger. His name is Wyatt, and James Thornton has his own reasons for wanting to see him brought to justice." The music swirled around them, but Catherine felt as if they were in their own world, a world of dark secrets and hidden motives. "What reasons?" Jack's eyes were grim. "The men who attacked your wagon? They weren't just random outlaws, Catherine. They were part of Wyatt's gang. I wasn't just passing by that day, I was tracking them." The puzzle pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture far more terrifying than she could have imagined. "You were hunting them?" "I've been hunting them for 3 years," he said, his voice raw with a pain that was years old. "Ever since they rode through my family's farm in Missouri. They killed my parents, my sister." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and horrifying. This wasn't just about a bank robbery. This was about revenge, and she had stumbled right into the middle of it. "James Thornton's wife," Jack continued, his voice barely a whisper. "She didn't die of a fever like everyone thinks. She was killed in a stagecoach robbery 5 years ago. A robbery committed by the same men, Wyatt's men." The music stopped. They stood in the center of the dance floor, the other couples a blur around them. Catherine stared at him, seeing not an outlaw, but a man consumed by a quest for justice, a man whose grief mirrored her own. "So you and Mr. Thornton have a common enemy," he finished. "He took me in, gave me a place to hide in plain sight, and helped me gather evidence. We've been waiting, biding our time." "Waiting for what?" she asked, though she was almost afraid of the answer. Jack's eyes were like chips of ice. "For Wyatt to get careless, for him to make a mistake. And now, I think he finally has." "What do you mean?" "He's here," Jack said, his gaze shifting over her shoulder towards the entrance of the barn. "He's been in Silver Creek for a month, using a different name, and he's been calling on your friend." Catherine turned slowly, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Standing in the doorway, smiling and talking with James Thornton, was a handsome, well-dressed man. He was charming, he was sophisticated, and he was shaking hands with Rachel. "That man," Jack said, his voice a deadly whisper in her ear, "is the man who murdered my family, and now he's trying to get his hands on the Thornton ranch." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. The killer wasn't a ghost from the past. He was here. He was in their home. And he was courting the woman who had become her sister. The safe world she had so carefully built for herself had just been revealed for what it was. A gilded cage with the wolf already inside. The world seemed to shrink to the space inside that barn. The laughter, the music, it all became a distant mocking echo. The man standing with Rachel, the man who called himself William Prescott, was Wyatt, a murderer. He was handsome, his smile easy and practiced, and Catherine felt a wave of nausea as she watched him take Rachel's hand. Rachel, who was beaming, completely unaware of the viper she was welcoming into her life. "We have to tell them," Catherine whispered, turning back to Jack. "We have to warn them." "Not yet," Jack said, his voice tight. "Thornton knows who he is. We've been watching him. We need proof that will stand up in court, something that ties him to the robberies, to the murders. If we just accuse him, his father's influence will protect him, just like it did before. He'll disappear, and we'll lose our chance." "So we just stand here and let him charm Rachel?" The idea was repulsive. "For now, we watch," Jack said, his jaw tight, "and we wait." The rest of the evening was a nightmare. Catherine had to smile, to make small talk, to pretend that her world hadn't just been shattered. She was introduced to Mr. Prescott, and she had to look into his eyes that were empty, devoid of any light or warmth, and not scream. He was smooth, polished, his words like honey. But underneath, she could feel a chilling coldness. When he took her hand, his touch was like ice. "Miss Blackwood," he said, his smile never reaching his eyes, "Rachel has told me so much about you. I understand you had a difficult journey to get here. Was that a threat? A veiled reference to the attack she had survived?" She pulled her hand back. "It was. Eventful," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. She could feel Jack's presence behind her, a silent, watchful guardian. For the rest of the night, he never strayed far. He was her shadow, and his presence was the only thing that kept her from falling apart. The days that followed were an agony of suspense. Wyatt, or Prescott as they had to call him, became a regular visitor at the ranch. He brought Rachel flowers, took her for buggy rides, charmed James Thornton with talk of investments and cattle futures. It was a masterful performance, and to everyone else he was the perfect suitor. But to Catherine and Jack, he was a predator stalking his prey. They spoke in hushed tones, meeting late at night in the stables or on the open prairie, piecing together their plan. Jack had a contact in Colorado, a former lawman who had been forced into retirement by Wyatt's father. He was trying to find another witness to the bank robbery, someone who could corroborate Jack's story. "He's getting closer," Jack told her one night, his face grim in the moonlight. "But we're running out of time. Wyatt is pressing Thornton to accept his offer to buy the neighboring parcel of land. If he gets a foothold here, it will be harder to get rid of him." Catherine's role was to stay close to Rachel, to be her friend, and to listen. It was a role that tore her apart. She had to listen to Rachel gush about how wonderful William was, how he was so different from the rough cowboys she was used to. "He's a gentleman, Catherine," Rachel would say, her eyes shining. "He understands things. He's talking about taking me to San Francisco, to see the ocean." Each word was like a knife in Catherine's heart. She wanted to scream the truth, to shake her friend and tell her the man she was falling for was a monster. But she had promised Jack she would wait. The breaking point came one afternoon a week later. Catherine was in Thornton's office, helping him with the ledgers, when Wyatt arrived unexpectedly. Thornton was out checking a fence line, and Rachel was in town. It was just Catherine and him. "Miss Blackwood," he said, closing the office door behind him. The friendly mask was gone. His eyes were cold and hard. "We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Prescott," she said, standing up, her hand instinctively going to the letter opener on the desk. "Oh, I think you do," he said, taking a step closer. "You see, I've been doing some thinking about that wagon attack, the one you so miraculously survived. My men were supposed to leave no witnesses. I've been wondering how they could have been so careless." Her blood ran cold. He knew. And then I remembered, he continued, his voice a soft, menacing purr. The description of the girl, honey blonde hair, from the east, headed for the Thornton Ranch. He smiled, a chilling, predatory expression. It was you, wasn't it? You're the one who got away. She backed away until her back hit the wall. The office suddenly felt like a trap. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? He took another step, closing the distance between them. I can't have loose ends, Catherine. My father taught me that. And you are a very dangerous loose end. He lunged for her. She screamed, shoving the heavy desk into his path. He stumbled, giving her a precious second. She didn't run for the door he was blocking. She ran for the window. She threw it open, not caring about the drop, and scrambled out onto the porch roof. She heard him curse behind her as she slid down the steep shingles, her dress tearing, her hands raw. She hit the ground hard, the impact jarring her to the bone, but she scrambled to her feet and ran. She ran towards the corrals, towards the stables, screaming Jack's name. She saw him then, running from the barn, his face a mask of fury. Wyatt appeared on the porch, a gun in his hand. He took aim at her. "Catherine, get down!" Jack roared. She dove behind a water trough just as Wyatt's gun cracked. The bullet splintered the wood inches from her head. Jack was already moving, pulling his own Colt, his movements a blur of deadly efficiency. He didn't run for cover. He ran straight at Wyatt, firing as he went. Wyatt fired back, his shots wild. He wasn't a gunman. He was a coward who hired others to do his killing. Jack was not. His first shot hit Wyatt in the shoulder, spinning him around. His second hit the gun, sending it flying from Wyatt's hand. Wyatt screamed, clutching his shoulder, his face a mask of disbelief and pain. He stumbled back into the house. Jack didn't follow. He ran to Catherine, his eyes wild with fear. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands checking her for injuries. "No," she gasped, her body shaking uncontrollably. "I'm not hurt. He knows. He knows who I am." "I know," Jack said grimly. Just then, James Thornton and a half-dozen ranch hands came galloping into the yard, drawn by the gunshots. "What in God's name is going on?" Thornton demanded. "It's over, James," Jack said, his eyes never leaving the house. "He made his move." Thornton understood immediately. He dismounted, pulling the rifle from his saddle scabbard. "Men, surround the house. He's not getting away this time." But Wyatt wasn't trying to get away. He was trying to create a shield. A moment later, he appeared in the doorway of the house, his arm wrapped around Rachel's neck, a small derringer pressed to her temple. Rachel was sobbing, her face pale with terror. "Everybody back off!" Wyatt screamed, his voice high and panicked. "Back off or she dies!" James Thornton froze, his face ashen. "Let her go, Wyatt," he said, his voice a low growl. "Not a chance!" Wyatt snarled, dragging Rachel onto the porch. "You're all going to drop your guns and get me a horse. Now!" Jack and Thornton exchanged a look. They were in a standoff. Wyatt was desperate, and a desperate man was unpredictable. "Do as he says," Thornton said quietly to his men. The cowboys slowly lowered their rifles. Jack didn't move. He kept his Colt raised, aimed squarely at Wyatt's chest. "Let her go, Wyatt," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "This is between you and me." "It was always between you and me, Reeves," Wyatt spat. "You should have stayed buried." He tightened his grip on Rachel and she cried out in pain. "Now drop the gun or I swear I'll kill her." Catherine watched in horror. This was her fault. If she hadn't been here, none of this would have happened. Jack was staring at Wyatt, his face unreadable. She could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. He was looking for an opening, a split second of opportunity. But there was none. Wyatt had Rachel pressed against him, a perfect human shield. "I'm not going to tell you again, Reeves," Wyatt shrieked. Slowly, Jack began to lower his gun. Catherine's heart sank. They were going to let him get away. But then she saw it. A subtle shift in Jack's eyes, a glance towards her. He wasn't just looking at her, he was looking past her, at the water trough, and she understood. It was a crazy risk, a one-in-a-million shot, but it was the only one they had. She took a deep breath. She had to time it perfectly. "Now!" Jack roared, and instead of dropping his gun, he fired. Not at Wyatt, but at the metal strap holding the water trough together. At the exact same moment, Catherine kicked the leg of the trough with all her strength. The damaged strap snapped. Gallons of water exploded from the trough in a massive wave, hitting Wyatt and Rachel with the force of a battering ram. Wyatt screamed, losing his footing on the slick porch. His grip on Rachel loosened for just a fraction of a second. It was all Jack needed. His second shot was instantaneous. It was perfect. The bullet caught Wyatt squarely in his gun hand. The Derringer flew into the air as Wyatt howled in agony. Rachel scrambled away, collapsing into her father's arms. Wyatt was exposed, unarmed, defeated. He stared at Jack, his face a mixture of hatred and shock. "It's over," Jack said, his voice cold as the grave. He walked slowly up the steps and stood over the whimpering man. He didn't kill him. He just kicked the Derringer away and stood there, a silent, grim angel of vengeance, until the sheriff arrived. The aftermath was a blur. Sheriff Mills, who had been on his way to the ranch with a telegram for Jack, took a wounded and cursing Wyatt into custody. The telegram, it turned out, was from Jack's contact in Colorado. They had found another witness, a bank teller who had been in hiding for years, terrified of Wyatt's father. He had finally agreed to testify. Jack's name was going to be cleared. Justice, it seemed, had finally arrived at the Thornton Ranch. In the quiet of the evening, after the sheriff had gone and Rachel was safely sedated in her room, Catherine found Jack by the corral, staring out at the sunset. He had a bandage on his arm where a stray bullet had grazed him. She came and stood beside him, not saying anything for a long time. The silence was comfortable, easy. The storm had passed. "It's finally over," he said, his voice filled with a weariness that went bone deep. "Yes," she said softly. "It is." He turned to her, and for the first time she saw the years of pain and anger begin to recede from his eyes, replaced by something softer, something hopeful. "Catherine," he began, his voice rough with emotion. She put a finger to his lips. "You don't have to say it." He smiled, a genuine, relieved smile that lit up his whole face. He took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. "That day," he said, "at your father's wagon, when you pointed that tiny little gun at me, I saw the fire in your eyes, and I think I fell in love with you right then." Tears welled in Catherine's eyes. "I don't even know you," she had told him. "You don't have to yet," he had replied. Now, standing here, their hands joined, she knew everything she needed to. She knew his courage, his loyalty, his heart. She knew him. "I love you, Jack Reeves," she whispered. He pulled her into his arms, his embrace strong and sure. "I love you, Catherine Blackwood," he said, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both an end and a beginning. An end to the running, the hiding, the fear, and the beginning of everything else. A year later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Catherine and Jack stood on a ridge overlooking the valley. Their new house, built on a plot of land gifted to them by James Thornton, sat nestled in a grove of aspens below. The first star of evening was just beginning to prick the twilight sky. In Catherine's arms, a small bundle shifted and cooed. Hope Elizabeth Reeves, born just 3 days before Christmas, blinked up at her parents with her father's startling blue eyes. From the ashes of tragedy, they had built a life. From a quest for vengeance, they had found a future. And in the heart of the wild Wyoming territory, 2 lonely souls had found their home. What started with a gunshot had ended with a promise, a love story written across the vast, unforgiving, and beautiful American West. If you enjoyed this story of survival, justice, and love against all odds, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more tales from the edge of the map. You never know what secrets are waiting to be uncovered.